We're rolling.
So what we're going to be doing, how we're going to start this, is I want you to go back. Tell me, okay, right now, who are you?
My name.
You don't have to. You can say your whole name, or you can just say who you are in the essence of the musician.
Okay. Who am I? Well, who I am is.
Well, how about this? That's the wrong question.
Oh.
Who do you want people to know you as?
Okay. Should I answer it?
Yeah, answer it.
Okay. Who do I want people to know me as? Well, it depends on if. My real name is Jack Holberg, but I have a name that I utilize in performing. It's Street Legal, and that started with my friend Mark Guteau, and would play drums on the street when he worked in Idaho for the Forest Service, and he needed to make gas money. So we'd play on the street, and once in a while I started playing on the street, and finally we actually started. I said, this is kind of fun playing on the street. We had some good times. One Halloween weekend, I wrote a song called "Seize the Moment, Rock and Roll," which was inspired by this girl that came walking down the street with a drink in her hand and cocaine eyes, and she said, "My titties are hard," and she pulls down her little front deal, and I said, "Well, yes, they are." And she came up and started rubbing on me and everything. And I'm a married man. I didn't need that. and Mark, basically, Mark and I testosterone level redlined after that encounter. It was an inspiration for a song. And we wound up singing that song all night, playing it, "Seize the Moment, Rock and Roll," and that's all I did. But anyhow, my name, and the reason I called myself Street Legal and the band Street Legal is because we were playing on the street, and we're barely legal. And also, Street Legal is a term for a automotive term, like if you're driving a car that's at the racetrack or the drag strip, and it's got a license plate on it because it meets all the specifications of brakes and lights and so forth. It's Street Legal, and I kind of dig those cars, and that's why I use that as a name for my band. And my musical influences, well, I was back in the 40s. I can remember listening to Bob Waring and the Pennsylvanians singing "Cruising Down the River," and Arthur Godfrey singing a song on the 78 called "I Don't Want Her, You Can Have Her, She's Too Fat for Me." I mean, it was the kind of music they played in the 40s. There was no political correctness.
Okay, let's go off with that. No political correctness, right?
No,
back in the day, what do you miss? Like when you're,
I strive to be politically incorrect.
What was your best time as, like, was it like when my dad asked me, like he talks, and like when I turned 20 for the first time, and he's like, "Man, the years of my 20s was the best time ever."
Well, I can relate to
my
that.
other person. Another person will be like, "Oh, in high school, that was the best 4 years of my life. I wish it stayed there."
Some people it is.
What was your best time? If you think about it, was it the kid?
Well, in high school, my best time. Well, I was a class clown.
What was the best time in your life? That's the question.
All my life I've been a class clown, but I was always a class clown starting from grade school. I was always going for the joke. As a matter of fact, when I was in geometry, I got a 68 on my Regents, and the teacher wrote down in the comments on my report card, I have that report card, by the way, about quite a buffoon, and I consider that an honor.
When you got it, did you show people it?
Oh no, I didn't. I had to show it to my family though, and my father said, "Look, you got 68 on the Regents. You passed by 3 points. I'm going to send you to Manlius Military School this summer, and if you do really well, I'll buy you a new guitar." And basically, we used to shop at Sears and Roebuck, and I can remember hating shopping, so I'd always go down in the basement at the Sears store and gravitate to where the Silvertone guitars were, and I'd sit there and look at them and kind of wish I had enough money to buy one. And so I actually bought a guitar with the money I made as a paper boy delivering the Buffalo Evening News, and I sent $15 to the Alden's catalog, and 2 weeks later I got this Stella guitar with an action about like this, and I picked it and strummed it for a while and got a Nick Maniloff plectrum guitar book with his own little circular disc that you could get the tonic, the subdominant, the dominant seventh, and then the relative minors and the accidental chords, and you could just turn that for whatever key you were at, and it'd show you how to play the chord. So I sort of was self-taught more or less, and I learned a little bit when I went to Manlius summer school. I learned some riffs and in some blues in E, A, and B7, but I had sort of figured some of that out before. But there was one of the main influences, like. Well, I'm going to read you a part of it.
And before you go to that, Joe, just to clarify, what when you were talking about your dad, you know, the buffoon part of the geometry.
Yeah.
What time part of high school was that like?
I was a sophomore in high school.
Sophomore in high school.
Yeah, and then when I came back.
And when you got your guitar, how old were you there?
Oh, whatever I was, about 14. I guess I have to double back and subtract.
You were still sophomore.
I graduated in '61, so subtract 4 from '61, and it was.
This is just the technical questions now.
This is the thing. I was around 14.
14, and so all this, when you got the guitar and everything, that was all about the same grade, sophomore year.
Yeah, I got that good grade. We went to Levy's Music in Rochester, New York, and there
that's
was
the place you'd always look at. Or?
Well, no, what it was, we lived in Buffalo, but I also lived in Rochester, and we used to see this guy who was playing the piano. His last name was Levy, and he played his piano and saying, "Come on down to Levy's," to a tune of something. I forget the tune.
Yeah.
And he played and so we went there to get, because that's where what music star was remembered. And so we drove to Rochester, and there, sitting in this little cabinet, was this 175D with a cutout, and it was a jazz guitar. It was the one that's like, it's like when you go to find a car, sometimes there's one that you bond with. Well, that was the guitar I bonded with. So we bought it for me.
Where's that guitar today, do you know?
It's in my basement. It's actually in my bedroom right now.
So you'll have to bring that down so we can.
I should have done that. I didn't know we were going to do it.
No, that's cool. We'll make this is a video. This is like me taking notes.
Okay, so that's
like
cool. Well, I'll bring it down.
It's like we're photocopying this with your voice of your paper.
Yes.
And we're adding all the cool notes.
Oh, sure. So I can go get the guitar later today.
We can get that later today,
bring it
next
back.
week,
No,
whatever.
I'm up for it now because it's a day off. And so basically, I'd like to read what I've started. I'm not going to read much, but I'm going to read a little deal I want to put at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, go ahead and read it here. I'm going to get a little tighter.
Okay. Oh, you don't have to get.
Run, and I want you to read this. I'm going to go check on people. I'll keep on coming back.
Okay, I'll start reading from the whole thing now.
This thing does itself, man.
Okay.
Good stuff.
I'm ready.
Go ahead.
At a finite point in the universal space-time continuum, a cosmic event of cataclysmic proportions occurs. A rent in the fabric of the space-time continuum is torn asunder, as well as the interdimensional barriers are breached, causing effects to alter forever the status quo of the state of humanity's condition as we know it today. Our story begins. Oh, excuse me, that was the beginning of Virtual 3000. I apologize for that. But being street legal on the road of dreams. At a finite point in the universal space-time continuum, this is getting redundant, the street legal saga begins. In the early 50s, on a jukebox in a roadside diner in western New York, not too far from Rochester, a record is played on the jukebox. Bill Haley and the Comets, Rock Around the Clock. A spark is ignited. The flame of interest is fanned by WKBW disc jockey George Hound Dog Lorenz, who used to have oh, boom, 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 boom. That was the bass line from this record. It was called Big Heavy, and it had saxophones. And he'd say, "Dick, man, the hound's around. If you're going to be out on your short, make sure it's yours." You know, he's a cool guy. He played records for people that we would nobody else would have heard other than the race records. He played all the black artists like Little Willie John, Laverne Baker, Jim Dandy to the Rescue. Little Willie John sang Fever before Peggy Lee. And like Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry. And George Lorenz spins the rhythm and blues, Laverne Baker, Jim Dandy, Little Willie John, Fever, John Lee Hooker, Bo Diddley, to name but a few of the many blues, jazz, and rhythm and blues people were there. Eventually, rock and roll artists Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly. This music viscerally impacts the listener with a primeval, energized awakening of dormant emotions and sensations of musical rebirth. And I was told that was one of the epiphanal moments in my life musically, was hearing Bill Haley and the Comets, and later on hearing Elvis Presley, and later on listening to the Everly Brothers, later on listening to Chuck Berry and all of his phenomenal records. And I would buy sheet music and play along to the chords. And I actually, I can read some more about this. At the age of 15, money earned and saved from delivering the Buffalo Evening News, $15 is remitted to the Alden catalog. 2 weeks later, a Stella flat-top Sunburst guitar is delivered in the mail. Eventually, a DeArmond electric pickup is installed in the sound hole, and a patch cord is altered to place a RCA plug on one end to fit in the amplifier of the Sears and Roebuck hi-fi record machine. Many hours are spent with the Nick Maniloff Plectrum Guitar Instruction Book. The enrolled round, the enclosed round dial deal was able to give you the tonic and the subdominant, the dominant seventh on all the chords and all of the relative minors and the incidental chords, and that was a very interesting way to learn how to play the guitar. I went to Manly's military school. I guess I told Christian that in the year of my sophomore year in high school. I learned some riffs and patterns in the key of E, and there was a show called the Tom Shannon Show, which was on WKBW after it had been purchased by a top 40 conglomerate. And the George Hound Dog Lorenz started his own. He bought a WBLK on the FM dial, and he still had his program going in Buffalo at the same time. Played the early rock and roll hits. His theme song, which Tom Shannon wrote, was performed by Hackett and Raven. There were some folk guys that had Raven is Jerry Revson, who had the 49th Street Mission, we called it. It was basically a coffee house on Edward Street. A folk acoustic duo. They had a G, C, and D chord pattern, and I actually learned how to play the song while I was at Manlius. It was my free time was passed strumming the Stella guitar. Street Legal. Played G, C, and D respectively. Began singing the Shannon Show, KB Radio Top 3, Top whatever, News and Weather, where the music gets better. That was the words, pretty cheesy, but it was a nice song. It had a good sound to it. And my first completed song, I learned by ear. That fall, I won a Jan and Dean album for knowing that Wicked Felina was the name of the girl in that song by Marty Robbins, El Paso. It was easy. I had the sheet music. Years later, Street Legal and high school friend Ron Daniels, who played bassoon and went to the Eastman School of Music. He was a music major there. We helped produce some records for Tom Shannon's studio, and there was a disc jockey, Joey Reynolds, who and there was another disc jockey, Dick Nevereth, and they had done a song parodying the Hound Dog, and they had imitated his voice and so forth. And we worked on a second song for them. It was about the Beatles. It was some kid had written a satire about the Beatles, and it was enclosed little parodies of all the songs. All I can remember about it is we're going to have a party. We're going to chase them all into the da-da-da-da. We're going to chase them all into the Boston River. It was about the Beatles coming to, and before the Beatles were due to come to make their tour, we were going to record this record, and it was a pretty good record. We did all the music and did the words for it, but Joey and Dick Neverth were gonna sing the song, and they never actually did. They tried, but Reynolds got a TV show, and Neverth had always wanted one, and so he didn't have his heart in it, so it never did get released. But it was a good. We got reimbursed and got to record. I got to record some songs there of my own and put them on masters and stuff. And so that's pretty much that part. I was kind of a wild kid when I was in, like you can see, I got 68 on my Regents. So I got 98 on my Regents, and I pretty much had nothing to do but study, so that's one of the reasons. And I did take a second course, was English. You needed to take 2 courses, and I can remember this guy that looked like an old writer, because he kind of just had that look, and he smoked Luckies, and that was the day when they could smoke in the room, and he drank, I'm sure it was water, but could have been vodka, who knows. But one thing that always stuck with me out of all my education was this English guy said, there's 2 forms of communication. You got different languages, but there's also art and music. So there's more than one. There's 3 forms of communication. And that's something that's of all the things in my education between the grade school, the secondary, and college for that matter, that's all I remember of the actual education, other than maybe some of the mathematics and stuff. But I started a band. I went to the Judson School in Scottsdale, Arizona, and started my junior year because I was raising too much cane and having too much fun and hanging out with people my dad didn't appreciate. I mean, they weren't bad people. We just kind of partied a little bit too much and all that. So I went to that school, and that was a really good thing, actually. I started studying, and I did some music with a guy named Dave Long when I first went there. It was the second half of my junior year. He lived in Buenos Aires, and his father worked for an oil company, and he wrote a song called Tribute to a Telephone Pole, which was kind of an instrumental, and it was about a dog, but it was a musical, like a instrumental. And he made up some bogus stuff. Sto Angelo school documents, like we were going to that school, and we were 21 years old, and we stapled them together. It was really cheesy, but we carried them, and we never really got asked for them, but we had them in our pockets. And I remember we went to a bar that was on a Saturday night. We were there, and this cop came in, and he said, "Well, you better get out of here. Somebody was stabbed here last week." So he didn't bust us or anything, but we used to jam and do some rock and roll, and I jammed with another guy in the dorm that played guitar as well. But then I came back to school on my senior year, and there was a guy named Eric who played drums with Ricky Nelson in sessions and then just jamming. And he knew some musicians in Phoenix. And so we went into Phoenix and jammed with Craig Kalkowski, Jim Roberts, and this Eric, I forget his last name, the drummer. It was fun. But he said, I enjoyed jamming, but I really don't have enough time to get into a band situation. But you got 2 guitar players, you can figure something out. So we did. We started a band. And because we all had Gibson guitars, we called it the Gibsons. And we had they had a friend of theirs who was kind of like a midget that played the bongo drum, so he was our drummer. And we drove around Phoenix, Arizona in a 1955 Ford convertible with the top down because it wasn't raining. And we'd put our equipment in the back seat, and the bongo player would sit he fit just enough room for the bongo player, and all our amplifiers and our guitars fit in the back seat. And we traveled around Phoenix, Arizona, and we were trying to practice one time, and we went to one of Craig's dad was a realtor, and it was Cal Kalkowski, his name was, and he had listed a house, and the power was still on, and so we plugged in, and we were playing and jamming, and pretty soon the cops showed up, and so we got a little bit in trouble for that. So that night we went up to North Mountain Park, and they had light stanchions for the basketball courts and the tennis courts, and at the base of the light poles they had outlets. So we plugged in our amps, and we started jamming, and somebody from down the hill came up, and they were from a kegger from students from ASU. They invited us to come down and play, so we went down there and we jammed, and it was cool. And our first actual gig was when Craig's sister-in-law knew somebody that was running the Good Shepherd's Home. And the Good Shepherd's Home was something that was sponsored by the Catholic Church so that girls that would get pregnant could have their babies and not have the embarrassment of being in school. It was a big deal back in the 50s. You didn't really see people going to school pregnant till into the late 60s and not having a big problem. But anyhow, I digress. We did a set for the girls in the Good Shepherd's Home, and it was kind of, we actually more or less had a captive audience, but the way the girls reacted to the music and the swooning kind of and the moaning and caused us, at least me, to figure out that maybe this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. As well as any musician that picked up a guitar, he'll probably tell you the same thing. I picked up the guitar so I could meet girls or gain popularity or whatever. I just like music, and I also figured, well, maybe I could get some popularity and maybe increase my groups of friends or so forth. But anyhow, we enjoyed doing that, and so we actually got booked in record hops Fridays and Saturday nights. And so we'd play in different high school gyms in Phoenix, and we didn't get money. We didn't want any money. We just wanted to perform. And we did it. We played all the songs that we could figure out. We had them all down pretty good. We had a lot of Chuck Berry. We did a lot of Elvis. We did Big Bopper and some Buddy Holly stuff. And some instrumental stuff as well. We did like Walk Don't Run and the Guitar Boogie Shuffle. And it was fun, and that was like my first real band. And when I came back to Buffalo, I met a man named Frank, well, he was a kid like I was, named Frank Anelek, and he played the guitar, and he had an amp and everything, and so we got together to jam one time, and he didn't know how to play it. He just knew how to move his fingers and look good. And I said, well, no, you got to learn how to play it. So I tuned it into an open E and showed him how to play an open E, then use a bar for the A and then up to the B, so he'd get the 3 chords. And we were off and running. We had a kid that played saxophone and somebody playing drums. I can't remember who they were. And we actually, oddly enough, got to do a record hop with Danny Nevereth. That was his name, Danny Nevereth, and the guy who was that didn't really have his heart in singing that song, and that record didn't get promoted. But anyway, yeah, we played a record hop up in Fort Erie, Canada, and I remember him saying, "Okay, I'm going to sing Good Night, Irene" by Huey Ledbetter, otherwise known as Leadbelly. And so kind of faked it. We figured out the chords, and we did it in the key of E, which was easy. But we did different venues. We auditioned at this one bar over near the Genesee Street, near the airport, and we came in and we thought we were supposed to be there on a Saturday, and they said, "Well, you were supposed to be here last Saturday," and we said, "Well, we thought according to the date we got was this Saturday," but I'm not sure to this day which one who was wrong, us or them. But anyway, we didn't get another gig. But we were the first band for the White Lodge, which was a bar in Clarence, New York. And I was back in Clarence, where I went to Clarence High School up until my junior year, and we actually performed in the assembly hall where they showed the movies and everything too, for all the students. And so that was kind of interesting to be able to play in a school that I went to. I didn't graduate there, and that worked out pretty good. And we used to drive around with the guitars and the amps. I can remember we went up to Fort Erie, and we jammed at this hotel up near Shirkston. It was kind of like what Florida is to us. That shore was kind of on Lake Erie and was sort of like where people from like Toronto and so forth, they'd come down there, and we had some fun doing that. And we'd plug in down at Akron State Park. We'd plug in and play there and do a set, or play for an hour or two, depending on what. We found places to jam, and we that lasted for quite a while. I'm going to try and look at my notes here, because I made an outline of which bands I was in. Let's see if I can find that. I'll wing it. I did a lot of singles after the band broke up. Frank got married to Winifred, and the lady I was hanging out with, I can't remember her name. She married Dave Burke. But we had a good summer. We jammed around, had fun with the guitars, and then I moved downtown. That's why, one of the reasons. And I started doing singles pretty much and jamming with people and sitting around the student union at the University of Buffalo, and then also at the Buffalo State College, which was on Elmwood Avenue, and I lived on Lancaster Avenue, just up the street from Elmwood. So I used to hang out, and I wound up getting involved with folk music, and I used to go to the Hootenannies at the Limelight Gallery. I mentioned them before. Jerry Raven ran it, and actually John Kay from Steppenwolf, he was actually from Germany, and he moved to Buffalo, and he became a citizen eventually. But he used to sing a song, Karina, Karina, and Well, it's T for Texas, T for Tennessee, T for Thelma made a fool out of me. And he'd sing that every Sunday, and it was pretty cool. And when he came to Buffalo, New York with his band Steppenwolf, he'd also been in the band Sparrow, if anybody remembers the 60s, and some of the posters that were there for the Avalon Ballroom and the different venues in the Haight-Ashbury area in San Francisco. There was a band called Sparrow, and they were basically him and some people he met in Toronto, and they did, you know, blues and psychedelic and whatever. Then he was originally going to start a band called Steppenwolf. It was kind of interesting. The album came out. It was printed on tin foil, aluminum foil, and it was monographic. It was like stereophonic, but it just had the right and left, but it wasn't actually stereo. It was just could be played on a stereo record player, but it was actually mono, which didn't matter. And I remember I was with a band then. This was years later, from the Hootenannies at Green Lantern, but when John Kay played with his band Steppenwolf, he said, anybody that remembers the Edward Street Mission, come on backstage and talk to, and we'll have a question and answer time. And so a bunch of us, Carl Walters, myself, and a few other people went backstage, and he came down to the Parkway, and it's a bar that he used to hang out. I mean, he'd come back from trips that he'd taken to California and talk about Hoyt Axton and how he hung out with him, and he wound up was stumbling down a dock. He was legally blind, but he could see, but not well enough to drive. He ran into Tuesday Wells, and she took him out on her sailboat for about 2 weeks. He led a pretty good life. But the folk music was kind of fun. I got involved with singing folk songs, and I met a friend of mine, Jack Donahue. There, he was playing music. I've known him since then. We're still friends. I talk to him every now and then. When I was back in Buffalo visiting my mom, I went out and hung out with him for a couple hours at one of the restaurants we all used to go to. And he was a songwriter. He had a lot of songs he wrote. One of them was, one of the lines of one of them he had was, "Don't let the barometric pressures run your ups and downs. It's the would I, could I, should I question on my mind." It was a good song, actually. But we had a band, and he was actually in the band at one of the stages of it. We called ourselves the Metamorphosis of Temporal Conception Love Conspiracy Electric String Band. Burma Shave, that was the joke. And basically, we sung rhythm and blues, rock and roll, and a couple of original songs. Like, I had written a song called Dynamite Love, which is a B minor changed to a G pretty much. I wrote that song, and we sang it. And we actually performed that song. And there was another song was called Twice Before Breakfast, which has evolved into Inside Your Mind. It was written at that period of time. And we had a guy named Jerry Ralston who used to come wherever we were playing all these different places, and he would come up and he'd say, "Can I sing?" And he'd sing, "Hey Joe, where you going with that money in your hand? Hey, I'm going down to buy a pistol for my woman with another man." That's basically the first line of it, and it's a song that's been played. And so he had a band that he was managing called the Mother Flowers Medicine Wagon. They were from, Mother Flowers Medicine Wagon. They were from San Francisco, and they were supposed to open for Spanky and Our Gang, who was like this really popular group, Spanky, and they all had great harmonies. They actually sung the Northwest Orient commercial, and they did it in their set because it was so pretty. But anyhow, Jerry come up to us and he said, "Would you like to open as the Medicine Wagon?" Because Mother Flower Medicine Wagon broke up, and I booked a gig for them to open for Spanky and our gang. And they obviously had some kind of falling out, who knows, probably a problem of ego. Some of the San Francisco bands, they just had problems with weak egos, or just, I got to be the star, and they all fell apart. Anyway, so we did this gig. We went down, we actually woodshedded, and Jerry Ralston knew some people, and we were in the basement of the Rathskeller, the University of Buffalo at New York, in this little room that was about half the size of this room, and you could see these big steam pipes that had covered with asbestos. Unfortunately, we didn't have any of it drop down, and it should have with all the music we were playing, as loud as it was. Maybe I should sue this university for 30 years later getting asbestos, and then, like you see it on the TV, called rolling around up, and you may have mesothelioma. Well, I could give you some extra money. What the hey? But no, to get back to it, we sat there and we played our songs. The songs we were going to do, the song and the two other songs I wrote, and there was a guy named Bobby McMaster who his right hand was deformed from birth, and he had a good left hand. He could kick ass on the guitar. He played lead and chords, and he put a thumb pick on his finger, and what we did was we bought Ampeg amplifiers in 1967. We went to this branch office of a store that was downtown Buffalo, and it was at the mall, and these people were selling deals. So we walked in and we got a deal on 2 Gemini 5 amplifiers by Ampeg. They had 15-inch speakers, so they're great for blues. You can kick really butt. You can get nice bass mixing in with your mid-range and your treble. And eventually, farther on down the line, Bob McMasters I was talked into joining a group with this guy whose father was a professor, and they bought some of those Yamaha amps that were shaped like this, and then instead of having a cone, there was just a flat piece of plastic that was vibrating according to the electronic signal, and that was fair. They sounded really good. They were loud, but there wasn't any real definition of nuances. It was just loud. But they had a pretty good band, and we used to have a reunion every St. Patrick's Day. The Metamorphosis would do a set. We'd just go there and start playing until it closed. We'd put the tip jar out, and we'd sing and do all the... I remember we auditioned for a gig at this topless bar on Main Street, and so we're like sitting there, we're like playing and jamming, and Carl Walters played the harmonica, and he played the guitar. And he used to sing a song, well, I got the bullfrog on my mind blues, the bullfrog blues on my mind. That was a good song. He used to sing that all the time. But he had this harmonica, and so we were doing one of our songs, I can't remember which one, and we're just jamming away and having a great time, and all of a sudden this girl comes walking out with no top and starts dancing on the bar. Carl almost swallowed his harmonica. It was so funny. And we all kind of just went, whoa, what's this all about? So we didn't get the job, but we had a heck of a good time at the audition, I'll tell you that.
But how old were you guys then?
This was 60s, early 60s, mid 60s.
Yeah, I'll ask you the boring questions, like the technical stuff.
Okay, well, actually,
was it like the 60s?
I was older than 20.
Older than 20. You're like my age, probably.
Yeah, I was about your age, maybe about 21 or 22, 23.
That's cool. Because me, I have to visually get the sense of everything.
Yeah, I worked at the Parkway Tavern, and it was a lot of fun. I'd meet all my friends, deliver drinks, and eat electric sandwiches from the infrared machine. We'd take these hamburgers, and they actually developed a taste for those. They actually were pretty good, especially for when you didn't have any money and a dinner came with the money you made from tips, and whatever.
Yeah, did you guys ever did they do that? Like, I remember my brother, he always talks about you go to play for a place and they give you a cover fee or something like that. And, you're getting like $100 or $50, so you have to split between all band members.
Oh yeah,
you get off the top of. But But sometimes did you guys just go not knowing?
We didn't make a lot of money. Actually, I don't think we made any money.
Okay, that's a
we,
key thing there.
we made money from the tip jar, which was sometimes piss
So
poor.
even if you didn't make money, was
We
that
played with
fun
we didn't
time?
care. We didn't care.
Yeah, because you guys get free beer probably.
Yeah, we got free beer
Yeah.
and
that's
free
cool.
drinks. And I can remember one time Walters would be playing pool, and he'd always use psychology. And so there was this guy who was his chef down at the Montefiore Club, and Carl knew that. But he's playing. The guy says, "What do you do for a living?" The guy's taking his shot, and he said, "Well, I'm a chef." So just about the time the guy does the shot, as he's doing the shot, he says, "Where? At the Deco Diner?" And the guy goes, "Brr." "No, the Montefiore Club." Yeah. Yeah, and he used to get pissed off at it was a mafia bar. It was a Tudor Lounge and Supper Club, and we used to play there every Sunday from like 1 or 2 o'clock till closing time, which was 3:30.
Oh yeah. Now tell me, I want you to go through. I bet you as I walked out of here and stuff, I was helping people out.
Sure.
I know you probably told some funny stories already, maybe. But give me some. Let's start. Like go back. Well, if you told like you already told you, or you forgot what you told. But let's go back. Sorry to throw you off track here.
No, that's all right.
But like I say, let's go back to like the day when you got your first guitar.
My first guitar was
Let's
like,
talk about did you talk about the story where you plugged up to the light source and then these people?
oh yeah, yeah.
Did you already talk about that?
Yeah, and that was really fun. And we actually played. I forgot part of that. The
Oh, you
Gibsons,
did.
the Gibsons actually played for the junior prom
Oh, you did.
at the school I was going to, the Judson School
Oh, they did.
in Scottsdale, Arizona, where there was a lot of screwed up rich kids. There was Don and Julie Johnson, whose family owned Johnson and Johnson, which is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and a lot of people that came from money. Michael Reagan was a few classes behind me, but he actually got the football team their first state champion in Arizona, which I thought was pretty cool. He mentioned that on his radio show.
Okay, and then
So-
you told that.
No, I just came up with that. I remembered that, but yeah, I just remember playing there. And I used to just jam in the when they'd have like the room where we'd have judo club, and where we'd have our every Sunday there would always be kind of a church service for
Yeah.
everybody, not denominational. I can remember one Sunday I was there. I was a little bit hammered, but I did read the prayer I was supposed to read. Everybody knew I was hammered. It was kind of funny. I love to, I partied and raised too much hell in my life, I'll tell you that.
Dude,
I got a
sounds
punch.
like
I
our
punched.
church at Czech, the guy got on stage and you could totally tell he was a little hammered. And the pastor's like, over here, whatever his name was, over here. But they were totally, they love him. They don't care. It's like they totally understand.
Yeah.
That's just that he's probably having whatever kind of time right now, and
Yeah.
is,
And Jerry Raven used to do a little shtick. Oh, thanks for walking in
It's
front of the
okay.
camera. That's all right.
I thought it was
We'll
good.
cut it out.
Yeah. Sorry.
Jerry Raven used to have this gag he'd play.
No, we didn't catch this.
Um,
That is what you need.
he used to have. He'd be playing his song and he'd go, this is WB, WD, WMF, MF, MF, evangelist show. I want you folks to take all your money. I want you to throw it up in the air, and what comes down is mine. He used to get quite a few laughs on that. He used to sing, and they used to make fun of each other. Like Hackett would say to Raven, "What did you do with the money your mom gave you for guitar lessons?" And then he'd say, "Well, what did you do with the money your mom gave you for voice lessons?" And it was just,
That's awesome.
they were a pretty cool act. Actually, they did a good job. They had a good band.
All right, so here, let me ask you this question. Like, the people you've been talking about and stuff. Who are the people that your fond memories that you remember you hung out, even maybe to this day?
Oh, as far as people, my grandfather.
Okay, people, your grandfather.
That was my grandfather. I caught my first fish with my grandfather, and the first one got away, of course, and then I got the second one.
Give us some personality traits of your grandfather. Like what?
Well, he was just a really nice guy. His father wanted him to go into politics. He didn't want to be a politician. He had a dairy farm. Yeah, I asked him one time. I said, "What was it like the first time you fished?" And he said, "Well, we loaded up our wagon and had barrels of salt, and we rode. This is from Plains, Montana, all the way to Flathead Lake. This was where there was no roads. This is way back.
This is like back when you were a kid.
Yeah, this is when he was a kid.
When he was a kid.
He was a kid, yeah. And
You're telling him this is what you've heard.
and I asked him that, and he said I caught 108 fish, and we sat there and we cleaned them and put them in the salt and put layers of salt in the barrels, and when we got done, we went back to and put them in the root cellar so they'd dry out and they'd smoke them or whatever. Anyhow, I asked him one time, I said, where was your favorite place to be? And he actually said, hunting in the Mission Range. They used to go up there and they could set up a camp and they could hunt elk and deer and so forth.
What would you do with your grandfather? You said fish.
Oh, well, see, when he had the dairy, it was really cool because
Yeah.
he had chickens and he milked a cow, and sometimes he'd be going, open your mouth, fart in a bucket. And that's what he called me, fart in a bucket. He'd say, open your mouth, fart in a bucket. And he'd go, and he'd perfectly shoot a stream from the teeth of the cow right into my mouth. And then I'd sit there and be really, oh, that's cool. And then he'd be tilling the fields with the tractor, and it drives my mother and my grandmother crazy. I'd stand on the back and hang on to the back part of the seat, and I never fell off. I mean, I could have if I'd have fallen off.
You like to have fun. You like to
He was a fun guy, yeah.
Fun guy.
He worked as a watchman at the Deal Lumber Company, and he was, I remember when we were walking around there, and we saw this big snake, and he said, and to this day, I'm sorry I killed it because I thought it was a rattler, but it was a bull snake, and they eat rattlers, but that's okay. But I remember that there was a fire there, and the aluminum had melted, and there was some hot spots. And I remember walking in my sneakers and stepping in a hot spot. I got this big blister on the side of my foot, but that was no big deal. But I can remember, just going fishing with my grandpa. When I was older, I mean, my grandfather met my grandmother when she came out to visit her aunt. She was just a young girl, 16, to visit her aunt. And she was born in Indiana and raised in Indiana. And she met this wild cowboy dude named Willard P. Willis.
And that's him.
Who lived on a ranch.
So this is on your mother's side?
Yep, that's on my mother's side.
Oh, I got a question about that. Now, we know all that about the grandpa, but what was like so you went fishing with him?
You know what I forgot to do? You know what I forgot to do?
Hit record?
I forgot to hit record.
Well, it's okay. We've been recording now.
Okay,
I'll
save tape.
We're going to play this as a show, just as is, too, if you want to.
I don't care. Oh, yeah, sure, we can do that,
It's
yeah.
up to you. It'll be your show.
Oh, yeah, I don't care.
I'm going to make 2 copies, one for me and then one for you,
Yeah.
and then one for the MCAT show.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Then
Can we pause the camera for a minute? I got to recycle some coffee.
Okay.
Or you can talk to the camera while I'm gone. Don't stop it. Why don't you talk to it? Like you can talk to it. Okay, are we on? Are we rolling?
We're rolling.
Okay, well, my grandfather.
And you talked about him shooting milk in your mouth. You talked about fishing with him.
Oh, I got more of that.
And you got the riding with him on the track.
He used to ride me to the barn in the wheelbarrow that he used to clean the chicken crap out with, and I remember my grandma and my mom getting a little pissed about that, but I was like, I remember helping him catch a rooster that was getting ready to be baked, and he said, "Now don't make him run too hard, or the meat will get tough. So you just gotta kind of walk up, and so he get close to the one side, so I can catch him." So I snuck up on the cage like this, and he had this little wire snare, and he went, and he caught the rooster by the head, and I got to carry the 2 chickens out, one in either hand, and then I hold them up on the stump, and Grandpa would take the axe and ba-choom, and then you'd see a quiet, no gobble gobble, gobble, because the head would be sitting there, and but the body would be running around, and the blood flying out, and we'd cook up and they'd gut the chicken and they'd find eggs that weren't laid and they'd just throw them in with the dressing and when they bake the chicken.
Oh, wow.
And I used to help him do that. I'd carry the chickens.
Now,
He had a dog named Zaray, which means
Zaray.
ear. And
what kind of dog was it?
he was kind of like a spaniel, kind of a hunting kind of dog. But my grandpa had to shoot him because he wound up chasing chickens, and not his chickens, but the neighbor's chickens.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's a question. Now, during this time in your life, like when you were a kid and stuff, did you have a favorite bicycle? Did you even have a bicycle? Did you have a wagon? Did you have something you played with, a pogo stick, some kind of object besides a guitar?
As I remember, first thing I have that I actually really that was when I was listening to 78 records, and we had a Philco kind of it was like a radio and a 78 record player.
Oh, sweet.
And so
did
I
you
remember
start
that.
purchasing your own
Oh
records
well,
or
no, I
getting
was a
them
young
for-
kid. We used to buy stuff. We'd get records. So we got the Arthur Godfrey. She's Too Fat for Me. My dad thought that was a good. He was Norwegian. That was a funny thing. Anyway, and my grandfather and my grandmother, they drove back to Indiana, and this is way in the days when there wasn't that many roads. And Grandpa was packing his sidearm. He comes driving into Indiana. People freaked out. This Montana cowboy, but
He packed it like in a holster?
he was wearing his holster. Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
he walked around like everybody walked
This is
around.
the
Like
grandpa
that.
who would call you fart in a bucket.
Oh yeah,
That's awesome. That's a cool characteristic right there.
yeah. He was a good guy.
It sounds like a good guy. It sounded like he was fun. I can
He was
see
a
where
lot
you
of
get
fun.
your humor from.
After he passed away,
How was that? When he passed away?
Well,
How old were you?
it was partly my grandmother's fault. She told him to get up off his ass and go dig some potatoes, and he wound up getting a heart attack and having a stroke.
How old were you when that happened when he passed away? Were you older, a
Oh,
man?
I was grown up when he passed away. Yeah.
You were adult, just a young adult or whatever?
Yeah. Actually, he passed away just after my father died.
Oh, yeah?
My father died like around 76.
Oh, yeah, so you were...
1976. I was in my.
You're a man, yeah.
Yeah. It was,
So, like...
basically, my grandfather was one of my favorite people, and I really we were terrified as kids. I mean, we used to go out there every summer. We'd take a train. One time we took the train to Chicago, and the other time, and finally we'd take the plane to Detroit, and then catch a Stratocruiser, or take the plane rather, and catch a Stratocruiser in Detroit and fly all the way to Spokane, and then take the train back from Spokane to Paradise when you could still ride the passenger train that had, that was where it should be.
Yeah.
And there was a guy that owned the grocery store, and him and his wife would have his family. They would have us over. His name was Demur. I forget his first name. And Mina was his wife's name. But they had a cabin on Little Thompson, and it was huge trees and lots of fish. And we used to go climbing up and getting huckleberries. And one time I ate too many of them, and I was picking. My grandmother said I couldn't go fishing, so she went fishing. She was a hell of a fisherwoman. She came back with quite a bit. I'm not sure if it was the limit or not, but she was raining, and she came back. And I remember fishing with my grandfather, and we were fishing in the rain, and we came in, and they gave me a shot of brandy just to warm up.
Nice.
And then later on, but we used to do it every summer, and then
Every summer you would go over there?
yeah, and then I got
So
my
you were living in Buffalo, but you come out here to Montana?
yeah.
and go over there?
Both we lived in Rochester, and we lived in Buffalo, and we came out. When my dad got to where he could
Where
afford
did
to
your
do
grandfather live again?
that. My grandfather my grandfather lived till after 76.
But
My
where
grandmother
did you
lived.
live, and the farm was, where was all that lived?
Well, the farm was in Plains.
Plains, Montana?
Yeah, Plains, Montana. It was right adjacent to the mill, and we used to go out there every summer, and we used to climb the hill. I have a friend of mine, Clancy. I won't mention his last name. He's a doctor here, but but I knew him since like first grade. We went to school, first and second grade. He was a really smart kid. He would like. Well, I can remember him walking into the showroom of the McGowan complex. There was like all these different stores that wound up burning back in the 80s, which really sucks. But he went in to get this insect. He says, this is the one that completes my collection. You know, he was a really smart kid. This was like in first and second grade. He'd stick a pin through it and put it on his little board there, you know. That's why he's a doctor. I think he started off feeling, we used to have fun. Clancy and I, we'd go out and get M80s. I'm not talking about the crappy, what they call M80s now. I'm talking real M80s, like a piece of dynamite.
Yeah.
With a waterproof fuse. We put a weight on it, and we drop them off the bridge, the old bridge, not the new one. The old bridge looked like it was made out of a Erector set, but they got a new one now. And it would go boom, just like a depth charge in the movies.
Yeah.
And all these squawfish would come up, belly up.
Did you ever get any of those fish?
No, we just like to watch the depth charges. We had no clue. But one time, Clancy's brother was an architect student, and he'd built a model of like a ranch-style house on a wood that was sitting around there. So we took a couple M80s, and ran like hell, and went. Just kind of crap kids
I think
do.
every kid is
Every kid.
pyrotechnic.
Oh
like
yes, my
right?
brother and I damn near set the garage on fire when we lived in Buffalo.
Oh yeah, tell us about that.
Oh, I have no idea except for the fact.
You don't remember?
I remember that we used to build plastic models, and then right around the 4th of July when we go up to Canada where we could buy firecrackers, on the way back we'd always smuggle some back. Like we'd put a bunch of the big ones and some of the smaller ones. We'd stick them under our shirts, and we'd be sitting in the back seat. I don't think I don't know if my dad knew that we had them or not. He was smart enough; he probably knew we had them. But anyway.
That's awesome. But you almost burned down the garage when you.
Oh, we were doing something with gasoline and it caught fire, and then.
Did your dad come in like?
Oh no, he was gone. A babysitter was there.
Did she
Some
help
old
you put it
lady.
out?
She had no. We put it out, but she had no idea she didn't even know what happened. We sure didn't tell her. We didn't want her to tell our parents.
Okay, here's a question. Your dad. Let's talk about your dad and mom. You probably have. But I'm gonna,
My father, yes, my
Let's
father.
talk about your father. You said he worked for Boeing.
He worked for Boeing, yes, and he ran away
said he
from
was
home.
smart.
He's very smart.
He would invent things
He
and
ran
stuff.
away from home when he was like 12 and came to Montana, learned how to ride a horse probably, and how to twirl a rope, where you twirl it like this and you have to spin it like this so it doesn't knot up. Then he built one for us with a swivel so we could twirl a rope, but we didn't have to do this. But I can remember him doing that as a kid. I can remember him taking a piece of balsa wood from one of the life rafts that washed ashore, because in World War II they had balsa wood life rafts that they'd throw off of ships and stuff. And also, like for pilots, he had a inflatable life raft, a real one, and he built a paddle wheel with on a frame of aluminum tubing, where you could go like this and run a paddle wheel we had like sheets of aluminum, and he had it on some octagon-shaped wood.
Did he let you guys play on this?
Oh, he had to tie a string to it, a cord to it, because we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
When you were kids,
We lived right on the.
Buffalo,
We lived when I was a kid. We lived.
in Montana.
No, we lived in Seattle,
In Seattle.
and our address was 10,008-1 or something. It was a surveyor's line out in Puget Sound.
Puget Sound. Okay.
Yeah, and so.
And that's where you'd go
So when the
swimming.
tide was in, I was out there paddling it and paddling, but so that was a safety measure. And I used to tell him, "Oh, I think if I could probably ride my bike off the pier, and if I paddle fast enough, I think I could probably get the thing." He said, "No, that isn't going to work." But I can remember us walking around when the tide was out, and I'd dig some clams. Actually, I dug one clam. My mom cooked it in butter. The neighbor had clams. He'd keep them in a wash tub and feed them oatmeal, so the oatmeal would pass through them and take all the grit out. And he'd come in his boat, and he'd have these huge salmon he'd caught. And then his wife was a cool lady. She was like an inventor. She invented a little aluminum deal that you could strap on your wrist to be an ashtray, because everybody smoked back then.
That's
That was
awesome.
really cool. And I remember she was
opening it up
she was good looking. She was like a brunette, you know. And
Did she have this like ashtray like?
that she built.
bracelet?
Yeah, she was invented it, and she was going to patent it and try to sell it. I don't think I ever.
Wow.
I don't know.
Did you make it look kind of stylish or whatever?
If, it just looked like an ashtray with a strap on, but it was kind of stylish. But
From
you,
a car?
you could open it
Just
up.
popped out of a
It was so
car.
you could drive along like this, and Then
I
you
was
wouldn't.
gonna ask
Then
you
you
how to
wouldn't have to
think
throw
about
the
it.
butt out the window. You could just put it out and put it in the ashtray. And you
Right.
could drop the ashes in. But yeah, Jim Barnes, I think his name was.
And that was one of your neighbors.
Oh yeah,
that you
and
walked in?
and I can remember the little girl next door playing show and tell with me. And I can remember catching hell because my brother was a baby and he rolled down the hill and stopped at one of the timbers on the bulkhead my dad had built. I got holy hell for that.
Was your dad, like,
But I can
like
remember
humorous
when
too?
my brother, after my father bought a TV, my brother came up with a bowling pin and broke one of the windows because he wanted to see if it sounded the same in real life as on TV.
You'd be like-
But my
you'd be like,
dad-
does it sound real? And then just
No,
broke
no,
it?
but my dad, he took a piece of balsa wood off of a, it was a really large piece of balsa wood off of the life raft that washed ashore, and he like carved it into like a model of a ship that would be a whaling ship
Oh, cool.
because he was from Norwegian stuff.
Yeah.
But to this day, I know he's Jewish because he's got a Jewish name and he's very smart, and his name. Our name is the same as the name of a seaport in what once was Germany. It's now part of Poland. It's called Kolberg with a Z before the G, and eventually somebody got from since they were in Norway, my ancestors eventually worked their way to Norway, and my dad's father was named Kolberg, so I'm guessing, and he was a blacksmith.
Your dad was?
No, my grandfather.
Oh,
His name was John Joseph
Oh,
Kolberg.
okay.
Helga
On
was
your
my
dad's side.
on my grandmother Helga. She was a beautiful lady. She used to say, "Yeah, that Montana is 2 days long." On the train, that's what she'd say. She'd say,
Is that how you'd go visit your grandparents and stuff, just by train normally, or did you?
"Well, yeah, back in those
did your
days.
dad
This was
pack
back.
you guys
This was
up?
back when we lived on. Yeah, except I can remember flying Christmas time on a DC-3 to Missoula,
Really?
to the old airport that's where the Sentinel School is right now.
Yeah.
And I was terrified of doing that. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense
Well,
to me.
back
I said,
then-
why didn't we take the car? Why didn't we take the plane?
But you normally
Train.
took the train or the car, right?
Yeah, basically we drove most of the time, and then
Packed up.
but
What kind of
for
car
some
did
re-
your dad have? Can you remember?
it was a I don't remember, but I think
Was it
I remember
stationary?
one of them looks like one of the
Studebaker?
sedans, like the ones from the 30s, kind of.
Oh, yeah.
And I can remember riding around Seattle and seeing roadsters with rumble seats and people sitting in them.
That's cool.
And we would go to this ice cream place, and John wouldn't see it coming, and he'd grab a diaper and put it on his lap and so my dad, they noticed that, so they'd pull in and we'd have ice cream.
Nice.
He could see, he knew a couple of signs downward, but my dad was very smart. He took a box, made a box of wood or a wooden box, put wheels on it, took the blade out of a hay mower, found the exact point that it balanced, and he drilled a hole, put a bolt in somewhere, and he hooked it up to an electric motor, and I think he invented the first rotary lawnmower because
And
he had
he put a push
he
thing
put a
on it?
push thing on it, and
And you'd see him out there just.
oh yeah, he'd
along
mow the lawn with his little rotary mower. Yeah,
for however long.
we used to
Okay.
get. We had wild blackberries growing up. See, we lived right on the waterfront, and my dad.
How big was your house on the waterfront?
Oh, it was just a little shack, like a beach shack. It
Just
wasn't that
not-
big, but it
just
had a
not
wood
too
stove, and I
far,
can
just
remember my
those-
mom cooking on it and washing her hair and drying her hair, and the smell of her hair that would drop on the
Oh,
on the hot stove. And I can remember one time, my dad worked for Boeing. He was an inspector. He tried to enlist, but he couldn't enlist because he disobeyed his mom's wishes to not swim in the water tank that put water in the trains because it was not safe. And of course, he caught the hell was that, or typhoid,
Yeah.
and it blew out one of his eardrums. So he could. But what he did is he was really good as an inspector. He was the primary inspector on the first bomber, which I think was a B-17.
So your dad wear like
He
a
did the
suit?
prototype. He inspected the prototype.
So your dad was a suit guy. You wear a suit jacket.
Well, I don't know if he's wearing a suit. He might have, but
Well, what did
he
you
was
see
an inspector.
When you come home from work?
I don't remember that. I was before. This was long before I knew him.
Okay.
I mean, I got a good memory. I went to a picnic with my father and went home with my mother.
Yeah.
Old joke.
Yeah, exactly.
Couldn't find a better time to
But,
fit it in.
but he wasn't working with Boeing as you got older. Right?
Oh no. He was by then. He met. I guess he met when he was working at Boeing. I think he didn't meet my mom until later, I think. But he was in Missoula in the 30s. He worked at the office supply store
So he
on
came to
Broadway.
Missoula.
He was older enough. He worked there, but he was working in. And I remember seeing movies of them water skiing in the Juan de Fuca Straits, and him being so cold is like almost blue. And he was water skiing and he came up to the dock and they filmed him. It was all in color. My dad was like pretty cool. He'd do stuff and buy stuff and like buy cameras and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, he was like into that, and he liked you guys having fun because he built cool things for you.
But he met Larry Hansen probably either in Cleveland. I don't know where he met him, but I think he met him probably where Boeing was, because Larry Hansen Jr. Flew Eisenhower around the European theater during World War II.
Yeah.
He was a pilot. But his dad invented the coupling, which is the two-way coupling. The original coupling was a hose coupling, which you can find in every hardware store in America. And then the two-way shutouts, which you can find in every gas station in America. And then the two-way shutoff was one that was called the HK Hansen Kohlberg. And I asked my mom about it, and she said, yeah, well, it was mostly Kohlberg, but they put Hansen first, and he was the owner of the company. But your dad's the one that invented it.
Wow.
And she told me that when my dad passed away, he had multiple myeloma. And my mom had been watching PBS TV, and they said the people that had anything to do with Hanford, 30 years to the day practically, they'd wind up getting multiple myeloma. And it was 30 years after he'd been helping them and consulting them. He didn't really work there per se, but he consulted with their usage and what and their needs were for the couplings that he was selling.
Wow.
And he got to start I remember going to his office in Seattle a few times when I was just a little tight. I can remember going to Washington Husky football games with my dad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was he was really smart. The secretary later on that was working for the company, she told me that she was doing the books. She told me that your father invented the easiest form of books that are totally accurate and easy to do that she'd never seen before.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he was a pretty smart guy.
Well, let's talk about your mom. What do you
Well,
remember?
my mom,
Remember her slapping you in the head, or
no. I remember my dad bought her.
You?
Well, I remember my mom. She was okay. She was a typical mom,
Grab you by the ear, pull you.
Yeah, well, we any discipline we got, we deserved. Both me and my brother. Okay, we were kind of a handful. It's like, but yeah, she's still alive. She's 100. She's 94.
And she lives in Buffalo now.
She's living with my sister and brother-in-law. She went back to visit, but my daughter Iris went with her to fly, to help her fly, because she was kind of hard of hearing and legally blind, but anyway. She chose to stay there, and I kind of, as much as I miss having her so close by, it's nice to know that she's not by herself, because she was living by herself after because she remarried finally.
And that house is still in Plains. You guys take care of it and stuff.
Yeah, it's still there.
Mow the lawn and stay up there for a while.
Well, that place was built in 1950 because the mill decided to buy the dairy, which they did, and then they closed up a few years later, which really sucks.
Is that your grandfather's?
Yeah, my grandfather's dairy with a barn and everything was all gone. I was pissed.
So that house.
The house is still the house that was there was moved, and it's on one of the side streets in Plains. the one outside the dairy.
When was that house? So the house was built in 1950. Did your grandfather live in that 1950 house?
Oh, the 1950. Oh, he lived at the farm, but then until he built the 1950s house,
I got you. Okay.
and he put
And then then
he put a
your
Delta
parents
rib
took over.
roof on it that still doesn't leak. It's a nice house. My father and mom used to come out and visit my grandmother and grandfather because my dad would always buy a new Cadillac, and he'd go to whichever dealer he'd buy it from. He'd pay for it, and then he'd fly to Detroit and drive it home, or else usually to the West Coast because he wanted to break it in anyway, and he was already that close, and he liked driving.
Hello? Hi.
But yeah, my father was extremely intelligent, and my mother's intelligent. She went to Bozeman, and she graduated. And my uncle, Willard P. Willis Jr., he graduated in chemistry. He worked all his life for Monsanto, actually. And I think my father met my mother when she was working as a secretary in the office that was being run in Monsanto. That's what she told me. And my dad worked here, and it's really strange because I was working as an LPN, and I was working at a nursing home, and I was taking care of one of the patients or clients, or you call it. And this gentleman there says, he saw my name tag. He says, "Your name Jack Kohlberg? Is your dad named Jack Kohlberg?" I said, "Yeah." "From Minot, North Dakota?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I used to rent a room from his mom." And that was kind of interesting to find out. That it was kind of interesting because it's a small world. You don't really realize how small the world is. And I never got a chance to talk to him again because the person he was visiting passed away that same week. So. But it was interesting to find out somebody that knew my dad and my grandma. My grandmother, Kohlberg, lived for a long time. She was 98 when she passed on. She'd been living in the Lutheran home for years. And my grandfather, John Kohlberg, had a heart attack back in the late 50s. And he worked as a blacksmith for the railroad. My dad was born in Minnesota, but he moved to Minot, North Dakota, and he ran away from home, and he came back, and he was a very smart guy, and he met my mom at Uncle Skip's office. I think she was working in the typing pool or something. My mom's pretty smart. She's very intelligent. She wrote some poetry. My grandmother showed me the poetry that she'd written. My grandmother I was taking care of my grandmother because after my father's mom died, I just told my mom I'd take care of her mom for a while to give her a break. So I came out here on the train and started a band, which I'll talk about in a minute.
Did your mom type, you said?
Or she was working in at Monsanto, where her brother worked. When my dad must have been selling couplings to Monsanto, and he met her in the office, and they hit it off. This back in the 30s, I think, because the picture, the movies they have, it could be the early 40s, I don't know, but late 30s, early 40s, because they're anyway. And my grandmother was into flowers. She had beautiful gardens, and she started the women's club. She was the one that founded the Fred Young Park, that's next to the railroad track. She was active, and actually when I was first there, Margot Seitz called up my grandmother because she said she just found out they were looking through the records, and she'd been the one to organize the women's club. So would she mind coming for a dinner so they could give her a plaque? And she didn't want to take. She was very nothing was a big deal to her. She just did it. But when my mom was going to college at Bozeman, she had a little hole-in-the-wall hamburger place, and it was a little restaurant. It was called Iris's, and I've got.
Is that your mom's name?
Yeah, Iris Jean.
And that was her place.
Yeah, it was my grandmother's place, but it was her. It was Iris's Cafe, and she was making money at the cafe to help put her to college.
When college was pretty.
Yeah, for Uncle Skip as well, and so.
Who's Uncle Skip?
My grandfather's son.
Oh, okay.
My mother's brother. But anyway, my dad was a very smart guy, and I was sorry to see him go when he was only 72.
Wow, only 72.
Yeah, really. And
did you get to say goodbye to him?
Yeah, I
before you
did.
went?
I did. It wasn't really a good time in my life, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because a month later, my wife had me out of the house because the money wasn't the trust for my mom. My wife was a gold digger. This is my ex-wife. This is an ex-wife, yeah. Not my first wife. One of my ex-wives.
One of your ex-wives.
Kind of like the X-Files.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
UFOs passing in the night.
Yeah, it's all confusing.
But anyhow.
You can only believe so much of what you hear.
Oh yeah, that reminds me.
But you're talking about like
before the band.
Yeah, the band.
After the band Metamorphosis of Temporal Conception, Love Conspiracy, Electric String Band. After that, I did a lot of singles gigs. And I'd also, like, different people would call me up and I'd jam with them. Like, there was a guy that couldn't play worth a damn, but sort of played. But I used to play at the office. It was called the office, so people could call her home, say, "Honey," she'd say, "Where are you?" "I'm at the office."
They have that,
and he wouldn't be lying. Yeah. It was kind of a gag. And I used to do gigs with this guy. I'd try to watch him for the chord changes. And he was kind of winging it, not even playing the right chord changes. The bass player and he would communicate to me what key it was, and he'd yell the changes, and I'd kind of get the chant. It was country, so it wasn't that hard. It was 3 chords and, maybe in a minor chord, but it was like one of these comedian was on the Johnny Cash show, and he says, "I'm going to give you guys a surprise, something you ain't never seen before down here in Tennessee. An A major 7th chord." And he was getting Johnny Cash ticked off. He says, "Is it true that you were really in prison?" And you could see Cash just getting in. You could see the steam blowing up inside of him. Finally, he turns around and just gave him a belly laugh because he realized it was a joke. He just started laughing. It was really funny. But yeah, and so when I started a band. Well, I joined a band when I was living with the lady that threw me out of the house when I didn't inherit the money. She worked as a teacher out in the Kenmore system as an art teacher, and she got fired for slapping a kid. That happened long after I was there. But she was crazier than an outhouse rat. I ran into her after I was married to Martha, and Iris was just a little baby. We named her Iris because we weren't sure my mom was going to make it. She had a brain aneurysm. And so I joined a band that was called Flashback. And it was kind of fun because we wear leather jackets and put Vaseline out of the Vaseline petroleum jelly into our hair, at least that's what I did, and combed it back. And we did rock and roll. I remember one time we took one of the songs out of our repertoire, because it seems like every time we'd sing, jink, 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 bum, 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 hey, Bo Diddley, bum, 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 hey, Bo Diddley, have you heard, bum, 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 Mama gonna buy you Mockingbird, bum, bum, bum. We'd sing that song, and we sang this song, and we performed in dives. I'm talking about serious dives. I actually wound up buying a 32 from a guy, because that was one place I played that. As closest from me to the corner of this table, there's a small bar in South Buffalo. Somebody got stabbed. So I figured I'd like to be able to get home with my equipment and my money. Never had to.
Did you have it? Where'd you have it packed?
My cowboy boot. I never even had to use it though.
That's good, but just having.
I was just having it there.
You never had to use it.
Yeah, I always figured it'd be better to be judged by 6 than hung by 12.
All right, well, now we got to start wrapping it up because now we've got to Montana, and then basically when you came here,
Montana. I was taking care of. Okay, I'm going to tell you.
And you stayed here, right? Basically.
I'll basically stay here. And I'll get you a really quick sale. I came out to take care of my grandmother, and there's a lady from Plains, Montana. Her name is Footy.
Uh-huh.
And she was what saved me. I mean, I came out here. I was a cultural shock from coming from Buffalo to Montana.
To nowhere, Montana.
And taking, you know, and I really loved my grandmother, and I took care of her. She was cool. She was sharp as a tack. She showed me some wedding papers from the 1700s. She told me that I am a direct descendant of Oliver Cromwell, which explains why I'm so screwed up. I'm a Puritan at heart, but I was a hedonist. Back in the day, it was a very complex life I lived. I decided to go to a Unitarian church after I was thrown out of my house, and sang in the choir. And I bought a sailboat, and between the two of them, that straightened me out.
Yeah.
Donahue one time says, "You seem like you got a lot of issues. You're swearing at the other drivers." Well, that's because they're so stupid. But of course I got issues. I just got thrown out of the house because I didn't get all the money. What do you think? I'm going to be happy about that crap? He said, "Well, you need to talk to this therapist." But I wouldn't, because I knew she was crazier than an outhouse rat. And she used to take all her people and say, "Now, don't go to your friends. Just come here. We'll have little groups, yada, yada, yada." And she was stealing their money. But because he was going to this therapist and she was helping him, he said, "Well, you know, she told me that I was a kleptomaniac because I wanted to get back at my parents." And I could have said, "Jack," my friend Jack Donahue, I said, I could have told you that when I met you in the 60s and you stole glasses in front of, without me even knowing it, when we were standing in his drugstore on Kenmore Avenue and Delaware Avenue. And we were both out looking for work, and we had suits and ties on. It was really funny. Matter of fact, we got back to Elmwood Avenue. He says, "Watch this. We got suits and ties on. We're going to do this." And we actually walked into this deal, and he had a little notebook, and the carpenters are building it, and he's going like this, and he says, "Well, I think you better do this, and maybe you should do this." And he knew about building, and they think we had our suits and ties on, so we looked like we were, you know, important people. So they were listening to him, and I didn't say anything, but it's all I could do to keep from laughing. That was the same day as he stole. He was wearing the stolen sunglasses when he walked into the.
That's cool.
Yeah, we took the bus. Okay.
So now you're basically here in Montana.
I'm here in Montana.
Back,
Footy and I have coffee together in the morning, and
now this is the wrap. We gotta wrap this.
We're wrapping this up. And we started a band, and
1 minute.
we start with 1 minute. Our first gig was at the Stag Bar in Superior, Montana, and it was the women's pool tournament, and we played acoustic guitars, no microphones, and sang country songs and rock and roll songs and all the songs we could come up with to fill out the night.
Well, awesome.
And that was the first gig.
We'll start this.
And we each made $50, I think, or we made 50 and got 25. I think we each made $50. And the next job, which we'll save for the next time, is the Silver River Band playing in the Wayside Cafe in beautiful, bucolic Trout Creek, Montana.
Nice.
Home of the Noxon Reservoir, where you can run into logs if you're going too fast in your boat, and you might get lucky and catch a fish. Then again, you might fall off the boat and drown. It's all up to you. It depends on what your karma is that week.